Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Earlier this week, Claire Tippins shared a princess nickname generator, 3 pictures of her dog wearing a tutu, and 2 online quizzes, including what candy is your dream castle made of? Claire, your sharing has tipped the sugar scale and turned into oversharing. But have no fear, princess. Geico has something worth sharing with your internet kingdom, like how you could save hundreds on your car insurance just by visiting geico.com. No magic wand required. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Blog Talk Radio.
We are the You Are Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the You Are Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Good morning and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's You Are Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we are coming at you live from Atlanta, Georgia, where it is a gorgeous spring day. And for those of you who have never been to Atlanta in the springtime, let me just tell you that with all that gorgeousness comes lots of pollen. And so if I sound a little wonky today, I am suffering from our abundance of flowering trees and azaleas and all of the other gorgeous things that are in bloom here. The pollen is really taking its toll on me, so I apologize for my voice, but hopefully you won't have to listen to me very much today, and my guest will do most of the talking. So we are going to be addressing the topic of mindfulness and how it applies specifically to young tennis players, but athletes in general. And we will be touching on using mindfulness training for adults in business situations and that as well. My guest today is Lisa Wellstead, and those of you who have been listening to the show, you may have heard Lisa on my show previously talking about yoga. She is a newlywed, so she has a new last name, but if you go back through our archives, you will see her listed as Lisa Jones, and she has an extensive background in yoga and has transitioned into adding mindfulness training to that. So I'm really excited to bring her on and have her talk about that. She is a very good friend of mine and is just an amazing woman who has continued to expand her body of knowledge, and I adore her, and I'm so excited to share her mind with all of you this week on the podcast. So let me bring Lisa on the line, and we will jump right into the show, and I can stop talking, and then you can listen to her beautiful voice instead. Lisa, are you with us?
I'm here.
Oh, yay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for doing the show. I know you are crazy busy these days between teaching your yoga classes, teaching your mindfulness classes, working one-on-one with your clients, including the queen of the kitchen who has been working with you one-on-one and loving every second of it. So thank you for that. And
absolutely.
I would love to give you the opportunity before we jump head on into this to give the listeners a little bit of background about how you came to yoga and how you have transitioned from your yoga practice solely into adding mindfulness training to that.
Okay, so very briefly, I've been a student of yoga for almost 11 years now, and I came to it through my own personal pain of a back injury that knocked me in bed for about a week with 2 small children, and the chiropractor that I was seeing at that time basically looked me straight in the eye and said, you can keep coming here and relapsing in bed, or you can start to practice yoga. And 11 years ago, that wasn't a very popular thing to do, especially since it meant leaving a lot of the traditional spin classes and hip hop and aerobics classes for something that was a lot less stimulation, a lot more calming. But I did, and my own personal journey just led me through so much freedom from the back pain, and my body truly started to transform from the practice. And so I started my own teaching journey. So I enrolled to become a teacher and teacher trainer, and have never looked back since, and have been sharing my practice through my own studio at East Cobb Yoga and at a few of the local places in the East Cobb area. So because mindfulness, because yoga is a formal practice of mindfulness, if it's taught in its traditional forms, it was a very, very easy transition, right, to start teaching exclusive mindfulness classes. It was a very natural progression from one to the other, because there's such a strong connection between both. And there's just a really great need in our community and really throughout the nation for children who are struggling with taking an active role in their mental health care. There's a lot of stress and a lot of information that's being placed on them at a very young age. And so providing them with the core skills of mindfulness and the skills training that they need to really be present in their lives and to fulfill what matters most to them is a really, I feel, a really crucial element in rearing our children.
Well, I agree with you. And one of the things that drew me to you and your classes, and I think has been the foundation of our friendship, is that you are continually striving to learn more, and as you learn more, to share that knowledge with the community around you. And I, that's one of the things about you that I love the most. And one aspect of that is that you are a stickler for alignment, for breath, for being safe in your practice, whether that's a yoga practice, whether that's a mindfulness practice, whatever it is, you have the knowledge and you're able to share the knowledge of what it means to properly practice whatever discipline it is. And so when you come to work with a group of kids, we all know working with kids is really challenging. Can you talk a little bit about the specific adjustments that you have to make when you shift from teaching a class full of adults to a class full of young people?
Yeah, it is definitely a different audience, especially depending on the maturity level. So the teens that I instruct in yoga and mindfulness at the Ginepri Performance Tennis Center here in East Cobb can range anywhere from about age 12 to age 18. And so it is a challenge in terms of the maturity level that we see, that when we ask a child, whether 12 or 18, to come into a place of stillness where there's not much movement and a place of silence, that initially countercultural to be that still, that quiet, and it can be unnerving to them initially. But what happens over time and with practice is the kids really come to crave that place of being still. And if we don't include the meditation, if for some reason in that practice that day that there's just not time for something, there's a void that they'll bring to our attention very quickly, that we didn't practice meditation and they want to stay extra just to do it. So in the same way that there's a strong learning curve at the beginning, once we get them on board with it, there is this very strong attachment to maintaining the discipline of the practice.
And when you say meditation, I want to just clarify or let you clarify for our listeners, we're not talking religious meditation here. We're talking something very different from that. So for somebody who is not a regular yoga practitioner, or maybe has never tried yoga, who hasn't been exposed to mindfulness, can you explain what you mean by meditation and what's involved in that?
Well, there's many different types of meditation, but as a mindfulness trainer, what we're teaching them to primarily anchor their attention on is the movement and the sensation, the feeling of breathing, wherever they sense that in their bodies, right? So really the core skill, the primary skill that we train the kids in first is present moment awareness. So there's so much of their days where their attention can be either mostly on outside of their body, right, on the instructors that are training them all day, on the physical aspects of their conditioning. There's very little time that they're not in a doing or thinking mode of mind, right, where they're having to label, investigate, logical thinking, where the mind is constantly working, and we refer to this as the thinking or doing mode of mind. In mindfulness meditation, we're offering an opportunity to really shift our attention from the thinking mode and into the sensing mode of our mind. So everything that we hear, we smell, we taste, we touch, we feel, those are all sensory awareness, and it's a different mode of attention and of awareness. And it's not something that we get a lot of practice at doing, especially with a lot of the technological equipment and apps and media, the social media that's out there. These kids are always in that thinking mode of mind. And we understand that a lot of the anxiety and stress and depression, that those mental states are caused from spending too much time in the thinking mode, to where the foot is just on the gas pedal and we can't even find a break, right, to shift our awareness. So it's a skills training in helping the kids shift their attention, their focus more to what's happening inside their bodies, specifically with the breathing, but also other practices that we introduce them to something called a body scan. And this is a meditation that just requires them to really feel exactly what's going on in each region of the body and progressing.
Yeah, it's great. And I can, just tell the listeners, as someone who has benefited from being in your classes for years, it's amazing what even if you just take 2 or 3 minutes to do these exercises, it makes such a difference in how you feel the rest of your day and kind of your mindset once you move into the rest of your day. You went and took a specific training to become qualified to teach this mindfulness work. Can you discuss a little bit about that training and what you gleaned from it and what's happening in the mindfulness movement with working with kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I was teaching my own style of a mindfulness training, similar to what I was doing in the yoga studio at one of the local high schools here, George Walton High School. So their whole theme for the year was addressing the child, mind, body, spirit. And so this phrase, mind, body, spirit, was plastered all over the school media, through the bulletin boards, through the newsletters, on the directories, just everywhere. And as a parent with children that attended the school, I was curious as to what they were referring to in terms of mind, body, spirit. And I had contacted Lisa Lee, was the PTSA president at that time, and I said, I see the words, mind, body, spirit, but are you serious about addressing the whole child, or is this again something to help just improve academics? And she said, no, we really want to address a lot of the issues our kids are having with stress and anxiety and depression, and we're talking about the whole child. And so I said, well, what about mindfulness training? And she said, what's that? So it wasn't very long once we sat down and showed her a lot of the research and the data that we have in how mindfulness can address a lot of those issues, that she was ready to come on board with the program. And so once we did a pilot study with 2 of the health classes there once a week for 10 weeks, and it was received very well by the students, the staff, the teachers, and parents especially. I stepped up the training through an organization called Mindfulness in Schools Project based out of the United Kingdom. And they have been sort of experts in designing curricula for training mindfulness skills worldwide. So I believe they're in about 50 countries around the world right now with their 2 curriculums. One is .B, and .B is, if you could see the symbol, red dot with the letter B. So it's the name of the curriculum, but it's also one of the strategies that we teach the kids, right? So that when they're taking a .B, they're stopping, really grounding into their feet, feeling and sensing the movement of the breath, and really just being present in that moment in their bodies. And it's just a really nice 30-second portable tool, right, to help them get centered and reset and refocused in moments of anxiety. So not only is it a tool, but it's the name, as I said, of the 10-week curriculum. And it's for children ages 11 to 18. And it involves teaching mindfulness skills once a week for about 10 weeks. To introduce them to exactly what mindfulness is and develop a bit of a direct experience of the core skills of mindfulness. They also have a what we call pause.b, and it's a little puppy pause, and that's designed for children as young as 6 years old all the way up to 10 years old. And we're really training them at that age to understand what the mind does and how it processes information, how it processes emotions, why when they feel angry or anxious or stressed, what is happening in the brain, so that they can really start to connect to clear present moment states of experiences, so they know what they're feeling while they're feeling it, and not 10 or 15 consequential decisions later. So really powerful, these 2 curricula, and the government in the United Kingdom has offered a grant now, about £9 million grant, to study the efficacy of these curricula. So they're really tracking the children and to really appreciate and understand how it affects their outcome in mental health.
What's so awesome about all this is these are tools, like you said, that are portable, and they only take 30 seconds. So, immediately my brain goes to, oh my gosh, this is something that could be used on changeovers in a tennis match, or, an abbreviated version of it could be used between points, because the kids get 20 seconds between points. So this, to me, is a good time to transition to how you are teaching at the Ginepri Performance Tennis Academy, how you are teaching these players to use these tools while they're on the court, whether it's during practice or during a match, practice match, or during a tournament, and what you're seeing in terms of the kids' mental state, whether, you're seeing them be a little more relaxed, or what are they telling you when they come back in, let's say, after a tournament weekend?
Well, so a lot of it is just awareness of, is if you talk to a child initially, they really aren't even aware of that voice that's inside of their head that's chattering to them 24/7. But what we know about an average match in their level, at the elite level, is that the match can run about 3 hours. And in that 3 hours, there's only about 30 minutes of actual playtime. So for the rest of that time, the 2.5 hours, it's just them and their thoughts, right? And so that inner game is so important, what the inner coach is telling them and guiding them and doing. So really just that awareness, that knowledge that there is an inner and an outer game that's being conducted simultaneously is very empowering to the kids, right? Because all of a sudden something that was an unknown is something that they can help control and actually train to be more positive and to be more to improve their performance. So once we get past that initial, what are these thoughts in the head, what we discover is there's a whole lot of negative self-talk in tennis with these kids. And it's a strategy that perhaps some of them use, beating themselves up, very tough on themselves as a way of improving what it is that they do. And what we show them through these meditations is that that's not really a sustainable strategy to continue to beat themselves up, and eventually it'll end up in burnout, right? They just, all of that negative energy that they're doing sometimes 6 hours a day out on the court is just, it's not an effective strategy, and it's a really ineffective use of their time. So when we start to introduce concepts to them to help train the mind, so rather than being so tough on themselves, when they find that they have left that sense of focus and clarity and they've gone off into a thought train, that rather than beating themselves up for it, that this is an opportunity for them to be different and to show themselves some kindness and some compassion and let it register in the brain. Okay, I'm off, I've been triggered, and I'm in a pattern of reactivity. And then training them to really let go. They realize that they've taken off, to let go, and then to reset, to start again just by taking a breath and coming back to the sensations in their breathing. And what most of them will come back to tell me is, it's effective for me when I can remember to do it. But sometimes you're so caught up in that moment and it's so strong and it's so powerful and those emotions are really coming at you so quick, there's not a lot of space between the actual stimulus and the reaction to it. So when we can identify what those certain triggers are that pull them out of the present moment and make them become so reactive, we can use those opportunities, recreating them in the yoga studio and through their meditations, slowing it down because we have that freedom and liberty of not being on the court, and making better choices to how they're relating to that stress and offering more choices of how to respond. So if they're practicing this in the studio, knowing and understanding what their triggers are, then it's much more translatable or transferable on the tennis court.
And I think it's important to address that just because a player learns how to self-calm and self-regulate, it doesn't mean they're becoming less competitive. It actually means the opposite, right? I mean, in terms of what you're seeing, these kids are able to compete much more effectively when they're able to self-calm.
Absolutely, right? So we know the strategies that the mind conjures to get through those stressful situations are not very strengthening. They're very depleting mental activities. And so I want to differentiate between positive neuroplasticity and mindfulness, because this isn't a lot of that. It's really that ability for them to recognize in the moment while it's happening what's going on in their state of mind, right? So that they have all of these choices. They can start that inner coach to start to build themselves up with positive self-talk, but they can also just take a breath and recognizing that if there is a weakness, if there is an imbalance somewhere, that they can be okay with that in that moment and still use that opportunity as a place of growth, a place of development without all of that negativity. And so that the ability to grow the self is much greater when they're looking at each one of these opportunities where there's reactivity or a mistake as a learning experience and not something to beat themselves over. And that's a big shift in their thinking. So Djokovic is a very relatable role model for them, and he does have a mindfulness practice. He attributes mindfulness meditations to his competitive advantage, and if you've ever seen him lose it, this past U.S. Open, there was a moment there where he realized that he lost it, and you watched what he did. He really, what we call, took a .B. He stopped what he was doing. He closed his eyes. He brought his attention and focus inside the body to his breath, to whatever it was that was happening and bubbling up inside of him, and then used the breath to self-calm to come back. And he came back to win the match, right? So we understand that this is tried and true, a very effective strategy for staying out of that thinking, doing, striving mode, and really being in that flow, in that present moment where things are just unfolding magically, right, to make it all come together.
It's kind of that being in the zone thing, right? That when athletes talk about being in the zone, where, like you're saying, it just all the positive stuff just seems to happen without any effort. And what's cool is, to me, this being in the zone used to be kind of an elusive thing that we have no control over when it happens. It just kind of happens. And what you're saying, or at least how I'm hearing it, is we do have control over it. We can put ourselves in the zone. We can get ourselves into the zone just, by virtue of this mindfulness training. And gosh, how much more fun would it be to always be in the zone when you're on the court or up in front of an audience speaking or taking a test or wherever you need to be in the zone. Life would be so much more pleasant.
Well, it's really just setting the circumstances, setting the stage through a lot of these practices to create the conditions for that state of flow to manifest. So even though the kids start to understand when their attention has drawn off, that ability, it's almost like when you're learning to play the violin or a new stroke. The more that you practice that skill of bringing the attention back inside the body, right, the stronger that muscle in the brain, which is that prefrontal cortex, the mindful part of the brain, becomes to start to really set the conditions for more states of that flow, for things to just unfold organically and naturally, using the skills that you've really developed, be what they are without being muffled by a lot of the thoughts and the self-doubt and the negative beliefs that can get in the way of their performance. And that's the beauty of this, is they have a lot of control in how much time they want to train the attention, whether it's on the court or in through a formal yoga practice. We're giving them tools to not just be in a 20-minute meditation every day, but use life as their meditation. And once they start to appreciate that there is something, that being here more for these moments can bring more of what they want, that's the beauty of it. That's really the beauty of it.
So you said that some of the kids will come report back to you that they forgot to use the training that they've, been going through. What are some tools that you use with them to make sure they don't forget to use it?
That's a great question. So everyone's a little bit different. All of the kids have their own specific triggers, and really it's the attention focus that they relate to most. So when we're working with the breath, we try to direct them to feel the breath wherever it is in their body that they feel it most. And once we can get them connected to that, it really becomes more of an autopilot habit once we've done it enough times and rehearsed it enough times, that they do start to, the brain just starts to, that pathway has become so strong that the brain does start to automatically go to that place in the body to sense the breath. So that's probably the first area that we start to work with them with. And they're really supporting one another, being in a group environment as we do at Ginepri Performance Tennis. But they also have the ability to use a lot of the mindfulness meditations through some of the apps that we've offered them to do these meditations before they even go on the court. And that's the biggest reminder, is making it fresh in the mind and seeing clearly, a very clear seeing of what's happening before they go out, being able to identify the strengths, the weaknesses, and understanding that they're going to come out of that match in that same quality of mind, regardless of the outcome.
Well, I think that's huge. And there are a lot of different things that coaches teach kids to do in terms of preparing before they walk out on the court, or rituals between points, or rituals on changeovers. But this is kind of a new tool to add to that. And obviously the coaches at Ginepri have bought in, right? I mean, they want you working with their kids, so they've bought in. I suspect there are a lot of coaches out there, and probably a lot of parents too, who are listening to us right now and rolling their eyes and saying this is a bunch of hooey, and the kids just need to go out there and work harder. What's your response to that? I mean, you obviously have concrete results, and how do we kind of convince the tennis community at large that this is something worth incorporating?
Well, we would probably rely back to the evidence base of the program and the whole concept of neuroplasticity. So it once thought that around the age of 35 to 40 that we didn't produce any new neurons in the brain. There were no new connections, that it would be very hard to learn a new language or a new skill because the attention couldn't be focused. But we understand now that the brain is very plastic, and all of the time we are making new connections, more neurons, more synapses, able to rewire and unwire our brains in many different ways, just depending on the skill that we practice. So you may have seen in the media or even read in the paper about people who have spent as little as a week, like Anderson Cooper had attended a mindfulness retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, and they were able to hook the receptors up to the brain to get some clear, solid measurements before and after the retreat. And even after just a week of the mindfulness training skills, there were clear changes in the physical structure of his brain, a thickening of the prefrontal cortex, an increase of the gray matter in the brain, which is responsible for this cognitive function. And so truly being able to measure through these scans how the brain changes in response to what we focus our attention on. So there's probably, if you go to the Mindfulness in Schools Project website, and I believe it's mindfulnessinschools.org, there's literally 100 studies that have been shown of the effects of mindfulness training on not only levels of happiness and well-being, levels of calm, but also on performance. And I think what I tell the kids is, don't believe it because you're reading in a research study. Don't believe it because I or some of the coaches there are telling you. Put it into practice yourself and test it out yourself and see what happens. And I think that's where things start to change, is understanding that they can use this in the way that serves them the most. And they can really pick the core skills of the mindfulness training that really feed their practice as well.
So you mentioned that you're taking this training into schools, and my kids also went to George Walton High School, so I wish you had been there years before you got there. For sure, my tennis kid could have benefited from this, but so what are you hearing from the non-tennis playing kids that you're working with, just the general population at the high school level? Because I suspect that they're responding maybe differently than these tennis kids are responding. The tennis kids are in a very different environment throughout their day. I think you mostly work with the kids who are being homeschooled, but maybe you can talk about how the skills translate even into the academic setting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can give you one example, and I'll first say that mindfulness it's not a magic bullet. It's everybody relates to it on different levels. Some of us have a baseline already of mindfulness, and so we're building on top of that. And in the same way, some of us have a mindfulness deficit, right? That just getting them to feel inside their body and feel the breath is its own core skill training before we can even add on anything else. And so we see a wide variety, but I'm gonna highlight probably one of the most rewarding moments for me when I was at the high school. One of the juniors in my sixth period had realized early on that the mindfulness day had corresponded to her test day in an AP U.S. history course that she was failing. And she had believed at the time that she was going to have to retake it her senior year because she just couldn't comprehend the material. She was having a lot of stress anxiety. So through the first, probably the second, where we were bringing them into body scan and guided relaxation for a good 15, 20 minutes, prior to her taking to the test, when she went in to take the test, she was very surprised that she was able to recall much more of the information that she had studied, that she was calmer. And so she reported back, instead of failing the test, that she was getting C's. So by the end of the 10 weeks, by the end of the course, she shared with us as a group that she wasn't going to have to retake the course over next year, that she had passed with a C. And she really attributed it to that, to be able to walk into that classroom calmer and more confident and able to really stay present rather than going into a lot of those fear thoughts into the thinking mind, so that she could really have that clarity of mind. So that gift, to be able to give that child that confidence and to help them to continue to grow is extremely powerful, and something that I feel like every school should have access to be able to share these skills and help to support the kids, truly mind, body, spirit. Did all of the kids respond that way? Of course not. But I would say I saw that academically. I saw that with the soccer players. Some of them telling me before they were ready, one of the kickers said, before I went to place that kick, I stopped. I felt myself grounded and rooted into my feet. I took a breath before I charged the ball, and it made such a difference in my performance. I've heard from the football players as well, that how it really helped calm them, the adrenaline, the energy, that they were able to really channel that energy in a more effective way. So even the children that play a musical instrument, being in the zone is really important too, so that they're not lost into the thoughts of their head, and they're really able to embody the musical piece. And I think in any aspect of your life, all the mindfulness is creating is possibilities to really manifest whatever it is, the best version of yourself in whatever the activity, and in life and in our relationships as well.
Absolutely. There's so much being written right now about the stresses that our kids are facing, and the constant, like you said, the constant barrage of messages through social media and other media outlets, and our kids are plugged in all the time, and they feel this stress to stay on top of everything. And I mean, they're constantly checking their Instagram, checking their Twitter, whatever it is. And we're seeing a rise in suicide rates. We're seeing a rise in depression. We're seeing a rise in the number of prescriptions being written for depression, for anxiety, for even, I suspect that ADHD is directly linked to this. I mean, I don't know, but I suspect there are studies out there that this mindfulness training can assist with that. I can't help but think that this has to become part of, the quote core curriculum that our students are being offered from day one of school. And I mean, you're working towards that in the East Cobb community and beyond. .B Mindfulness in Schools project is working towards that on an international basis. Do you have any suggestions or tips for my listeners on what they can do to bring this type of training into their children's lives?
Yeah, well, right now, Mindfulness in Schools project is really trying to reach out to the teachers, the administrators, and the parents, because the adults who practice these mindfulness skills are really modeling the type of behavior that these kids can identify with to help stay peaceful and calm in moments of stress. So even if the child never participates in, say, the 10-week course, if it's being modeled by the teacher, if it's being modeled by administrators and parents, they're still experiencing greater states of peace, of calm, of well-being, a sense of well-being. So we understand this starts really with the parents more so than the children. So there is a foundation course that adults can take. And what it is an MBSR light course. And MBSR is mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's developed by the folks at Oxford in the UK. And it's a combination of John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness-based stress reduction course, as well as Mark Williams and John Teasdale's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy course. But the sessions, rather than being 3 or 4 hours, the sessions are about 90 minutes, and the home practice is only about 30 minutes a day versus in a traditional MBSR course, up to an hour to 2 hours a day. So it's a nice way to get, kind of dipping your toes in the water to test and experiment with mindfulness, to get an exposure to the core foundational skills of mindfulness. And what I found so far, I've trained about 60 adults, including teachers, counselors, psychotherapists, and even some social workers. And it's really life transforming when you give yourself the space and time to really look into your inner world and what's happening on, and how this patterning of your thoughts, your feelings, your actions and behaviors are so interlooped, and that it becomes almost predictable, right? That you can see why you think what you think and how that influences the decisions that you make in your life. And when they give themselves this freedom to really dig deep to what the thoughts and feelings are beneath the stress, we start to see layer by layer those that start to dissipate and to melt away a little bit. And it only becomes greater with more and more practice and skills training. So to find a foundations training, you would just go to Mindfulness in Schools project and under curricula, looking at the .B foundations to try to locate a teacher and sign up for what I call an MBSR light course to get a good exposure to it. What we're seeing across the board is that a big decline in the age of major onset depression in this country. So in 1967, where the age of major onset depression was in the late 30s and early 40s, the last research study conducted in 2007 showed it was happening more in the middle school years, between the ages of 12 and 15. So when you really stop to say what's going on in our world today that is creating this, you almost feel compelled at that point to take some steps forward and to taking control of our emotions and our stress levels and our ability to be the best version of ourselves that we can be without allowing the stress to dilute the quality of our living.
What's so interesting to me is sports have always been touted as a means of reducing stress. And, a means, especially for super active kids, kids who have trouble sitting still in a classroom, sports are a great outlet for them to release that extra energy and channel it into a positive outcome. But because of the nature of youth sports in our country now, the sports are actually adding to the stress. So, so it's this vicious cycle. And so by incorporating the mindfulness training at the base of all of this, so that the coaches understand it and can incorporate it into the training, the fitness coaches understand it and can incorporate it into the off-court work or off-field work. The parents understand it so they can incorporate it into how the environment operates in their home. The teachers can understand it so they can incorporate it into the classroom. I mean, there are just so many applications here, and it almost seems overwhelming when you think about all of the contributing factors to the stress in these kids. But like anything, you have to start with a small step. And that's what you're providing. You're providing that first small step.
Yeah, this is a really nice intro to what's possible. And what we're seeing not only in the schools is that as a nation, because the results have been so overwhelmingly positive in helping to control levels of stress, that a lot of businesses are incorporating mindfulness leadership programs into their corporations. So Google trains about 2,500 executives a year through in mindfulness training through something called the Search Inside Yourself Learning Institute. So they have their own in-house mindfulness training because they want leadership that is emotionally intelligent, well-balanced, and to improve their levels of creativity and innovation. Because really when we're that scattered due to all of this proliferation of information that's bombarding us 24/7, it's almost that defragmentation of energy and thoughts is really getting truly wasted, right? And so when we can, through the mindfulness training, get them reintegrated, there's all of this mental space that can be used for creativity and ingenuity, and we have a much more potential when we can start to peel back all of those layers of analyzing, interpreting, anticipating, all of those things that are really mental activities that don't nourish but really deplete. And so not only Google, who's a leader in their industry, but Aetna, the world's second largest healthcare provider, also is training not only their executives and work staff, but now they have an app. If you're a member of Aetna and you get your insurance through Aetna, there is an app that they have, their own, that has mindfulness meditations that they make available to their customers every single day. And so my feeling is that unless the businesses, really corporate America, saw a tangible benefit to this training, they wouldn't be offering it so freely to their employees without a huge upside benefit. So we are seeing more and more of that start to filter down. Tim Ryan is out of Ohio, a representative, has been introducing legislation to create federal funding for more of the mindfulness training in school so that we can start to be able to train teachers, train parents to deliver the curriculum in more schools across the country. And what we're seeing is a little bit of a pushback or a resistance from members of Congress. And I think the more that these businesses are embracing mindfulness as a way of regulating stress and improving performance and productivity and focus and concentration, the less power Congress is going to have in holding this back, right? I feel like at some point it's just going to explode, and it will hopefully be made available to every school across the country. And in the UK, what we're seeing in their initiative is to make the United Kingdom a mindful nation by having a 10-week curriculum in every high school in the entire country. And what a beautiful initiative that would be in the United States if we could have every high school have access to these tools for every kid that goes there, in the same way that they have to reading and science and math, that they have mindfulness as part of their core skills. And so that's the goal. That's really the goal.
That's phenomenal. And, I want to put it out there as a plea to the tennis community. If anyone from USTA is listening to this, anyone from the PTR, USPTA, which are the coaches organizations, the NCAA, the ITA, the ITF, all of you alphabet soup people, if you are listening to this is such a simple tool to integrate into the overall training of a tennis player, and it doesn't require any special equipment. It just requires a leader to take charge and to help others learn these skills and implement them on a daily basis, whether it's on the court, in the gym, in the classroom, wherever it may be. So I just want to put that out there, that I would love to see our governing bodies, all of them, not just USTA, but all of them, really take a look at this and go to the Mindfulness in Schools Project. It's mindfulnessinschools.org. Go to that website and take a look around and see how the tennis world can get more involved in mindfulness training from the player level, but also the coaches and the off-court trainers. Mm-hmm. And Lisa, you're a phenomenal resource. I know you've done work with Mark Kovacs. You're certified through the ITPA. you are a tennis specialist. You work with players of all levels, on the yoga side, but also on the mindfulness side. And I hope these organizations will reach out to you as well. Why don't you give your contact info, email, website, whatever you want to share with the listeners, so that if somebody does want to reach out to you, that they know how to get you.
Absolutely. So the studio is East Cobb Yoga and Mindfulness, and you can check out our website at eastcobbyoga.com, EASTCOBB yoga.com. You can also reach me at lisa@eastcobbyoga.com. And I would love to, I know that the NCAA is now experimenting because they have so much of the elite athlete depression and anxiety with the elite athletes, that they are experimenting right now, and it is starting to spread. So if I can impart any information that can help increase our reach and our tentacles out there to develop these programs, I would love for you to reach out and help in any way I can.
That's very generous of you. I kind of put you on the spot there. Sorry, but I knew you'd be willing to do that.
Of course.
That's just the kind of person you are.
Yeah.
You are very giving. You are very giving. So, and to the parents out there, I mean, any last words of advice? We're down to our last 4 minutes or so I want to make sure we get all this in. Any advice to the parents in terms of helping their kids get started with this?
Getting the training themselves, because you cannot be able to teach the skills of mindfulness until you really understand the discipline and the challenges of your own personal practice. And it's that oxygen mask principle, right? So you've got to be able to modulate and regulate your own stress in your life before you can teach it to your children and how to do it, because they're watching you and everything that you do and how you say it. And so when they see you really being thoughtful in ways that you approach difficult moments in your life, they're going to emulate that. So really going to an MBSR course or an MBCT course or the Foundations course with the idea that not so much that you're trying to do it to improve performance or to for any reason, but to really give yourself this gift of stability, of steadfastness, of a steady state of well-being. So then you can impart that with those that you love. So take care of yourself first. Really putting yourself first is one of the most generous things and selfless things that you can do, because then you can go out there and be of service to everyone that you love. So that's my biggest recommendation, is do this for you and then see where it goes from there.
And I just want to say that nobody's expecting us to be perfect at this. Even those who go through extensive training aren't perfect all the time. And so I think, that's an important piece of this as well, is to be kind to yourself when you aren't able to recall these tools and implement them. I mean, we all encounter situations where the stress is just too much and we implode and then we explode. I certainly do it on a regular basis. And so I want to put that out as well, that, Lisa, how I love and respect you, but, we've seen each other not be able to recall these tools in a timely manner.
Absolutely.
We have been in each other's company when that's happened. So I think it's important to understand that you're not going to be perfect at this ever. I mean, and nobody expects that. It's just one more thing to pull out in those moments of extreme anxiety and stress, or even minor anxiety and stress. I mean, when you're aggravated that the person in front of you at the traffic light hasn't gone and the light turned green. I mean, so Lisa, I just want to thank you again for coming on, and I knew you were going to share some incredible gems with us, and you have. To my listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to check out Lisa's website, eastcobbyoga.com, mindfulnessinschools.org, and get these tools and get started on the path, and it is an ongoing path. Lisa, thanks again for joining us. To my listeners, have a great week, everybody. Stay safe out there. Don't forget your sunscreen, and I hope you're adjusting to the daylight savings time thing better than we are. But we will see you next week. Just a quick reminder, I will be broadcasting from the DecoTurf High School tournament this weekend, so tune in. See you next week, everybody.
Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Today, Bridget Griffin shared a video of her daily yoga routine, 2 self-help articles, and her new blog called Build Your Inner Bridge with Bridge. Girl, your sharing has turned into oversharing. No worries, Bridge. Geico has some info worth sharing with your 7 blog followers, like how you could save money on your car insurance, update your policy, and report a claim just by visiting geico.com. How's that for building your inner bridge? Bridge, Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.